Hello and welcome to my channel. Thank you so much for joining me. I'd like to share with you how I made this bracelet, which is a graduated bracelet, and I've used silver wire and hematite beads. To make this bracelet I'm going to be using two different gauge wires. So I've got a 20 gauge wire, which is going to be the base wire. And the reason why I'm using a 20 gauge is because the 18 gauge just can't fit through my beads. So you can use an 18 gauge or a 20 gauge, it's up to you. And the other wire for the wrapping, I'm going to be using a 24 gauge wire. And I've got some 8mm hematite beads and some 6mm ones. Now, you might need to check how many beads that you're going to be using, because with this particular bracelet, because I'm doing a graduated one, you can't just add beads at the end if you're short of them. So as we go, I will explain to you what I'm doing. So I've got my wires now, and for my base wire, which is the 20 gauge wire or 0.08mm, I've got 35 centimeters of this wire. And for the next lot of wires, I've got 4 pieces of the 24 gauge wire, and I've cut those at 70 centimeters each. So the first thing I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be making a hook. Now you can do this separately, but I find it's a lot easier if you've got a longer piece of wire to work on than it is when you're working on a very small piece of wire. So from the top I'm just taking my pliers and going down about 3 centimeters, and then going to bend it over so that it lies parallel with each other and lies flat against the other one. Then take the back of your pliers and start squashing that as close together as you can. So if you use the back of your pliers, it works a little bit better. Don't squash it all in one go. Do it very gently so you don't break the wire. So now we've got our piece that's looking like that. Then what you're going to do is, for myself personally, I like to hold my wire so that the piece that I'm turning is actually closest on the inside so that it doesn't buckle. So we're going to now wrap this around our shaft. So just lifting it up and then holding it tight, gently wrap it around your shaft or your base wire. And then just tighten that so it doesn't poke anybody. So as you can see, it's tightened down quite nicely now. Now on the other side, I'm going to take my round nose pliers and hold it about a few millimeters just above that, and then you're going about halfway in the middle. So if you've got a bail making pliers, you probably want to go with a 2mm, just so that when we do the circle it goes into the center. Just bend your wire a little bit in so that you've got an angle like that. Then place your pliers underneath and make a complete circle all the way around, so that our loop looks like that. Now what we're going to do is, in this tiny little gap here, we're going to wrap this wire around there. So taking your pliers and holding this in place so that it doesn't lose its shape, wrap your wire around so we've got a really nice smooth finish to it. So just keep going around. And now, because we have the cut-off end from the other one, which might be a wee bit sharp, I'm going to actually put a swirl on there to finish this top wire off. So just cutting down a wee bit. Once again, taking your round nose pliers, putting it right at the tip so you can get a nice swirl. Just start going around. And just where, when you've done your swirl with your circle, you'll see it sort of like makes a bit of a flat edge just over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just cut that small piece off so that I can get a much nicer round circle to it. And now we can keep going. I've just taken my pliers now to help make the circle go nicely around. I'm going to fold it upwards so that it lies flat on top of all the wires that we wound round the main wire, and then just squash that down. So your little clasp is looking like that. Now what we're going to do is we're going to just take the round nose pliers once again and placing it just below the halfway mark, like that. We're going to fold it inward to make our little hook, and then at the end of the hook we're just going to bend this tiny piece up just to make it so that it looks like a hook. So I'm taking 2 pairs of pliers because it's quite tough, this little hook, and just bending it slightly upwards. So your little hook looks like that. And now we're going to put that aside. So now taking your 24 gauge wire, and then what you want to do is you're just going to line it up at the edge here, make sure that and then touching so that they're the same length, and get the halfway mark. Then what we're going to do is, keeping all the wires together onto our main shaft, we are then going to wrap that around. Make sure that you leave a little tail just so that we can finish it off nicely. So I like to start on the right hand side, so I'm taking the wires and we're just going to wrap them around the base wire, a complete circle, so it comes out the same size as it was on, and then the same with the other side just to secure it in place. Now your base wire is still going to wiggle around quite a bit, so just hold on to it the best that you can around. So we've got our wires in place like that, and then just take a pair of pliers and try and close them as tight as what you can get them. So just closing them down just a little bit like that. Try not to have too much bulk, but that's like that. Now what we're going to do is we're going to thread our first 6mm bead on. So threading that on, holding it in place like that, and taking all the wires and then flattening and going around your base wire, so wrapping it to encase the bead. So that's the one side done, and now the same on the other side. Keeping your wires flat, wrapping it around and back at the same side that it came from. As you can see, the wires are all lying flat on the bead on both sides. So now what we're going to do is we're going to add our second bead. Once again, another 6mm bead, and just pushing that down a wee bit. So taking 6mm, adding that one. Now you can take your bead and just push it down just a little bit to close the wires in a little bit, and just holding them tight once again, holding them tight and flat, going around the bead over the top of the wire and out the other side, so that it's back in the same direction as it was before. So we've now got our pattern like that. Same with the other side, flatten the wires and then going around on top and out the other side. So we've now got our 2 beads in place. So now I'm going to actually add a 3rd bead, because I think I might be only adding 3 beads. It all depends on what the length is of the 3 beads once I've done them. So placing the 3rd bead on, pushing it down to close the wires a wee bit tighter, like that, holding it in place, flattening the wires and over the top and round, like that. Same with the other side, holding the beads in place and over the top, around, out the other side. So that's what the pattern looks like now. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually measure and see what the distance is after I've encased my 3 beads. Take my tape measurer. So measuring the 3 beads just by themselves, we have got 1.5 centimeters, and when I measure the beads that we've done, we've got 3.5 centimeters. So in other words, we've got 2 centimeters that has been taken up by the wires. So now measuring the larger beads, I've got them measuring at 2.5 centimeters. So that's going to make it 4.5 centimeters. So that's 4.5, and we've got 3.5, that's 7 together. That's 10.5 centimeters, which is just that small. And if you're working in inches, it works out to 4 inches. But I need to have a 5-inch bracelet, because normally you go as a 7-inch, but this particular one is being made for somebody that has only got a 5-inch or a 13 centimeter. So I'm actually going to be having to put an extra bead, and I think they're just going to be the small ones that are going to go on, and then I will measure it again. This particular bracelet, you can't add beads on when you're doing graduated, because once you put the large beads on, that's it, you can't add an extra bead to the already done section. So I've added the extra one on. Now I'm just going to start adding the big 8mm ones. So I'm pushing it down, and then just continue adding the beads into the center. Now, as I said, it all depends. You might be putting 3 or 4, it just depends on what size that you actually need. So taking the left hand side and wrapping it around as well. So as you can see, the beads are now in place, so we're working on the larger ones now. Take your bead and just push it down just to close the wires just a little bit, and then once again taking the right hand side and over the center wire and back out the side. And the left the same. Now I've got the third one on. So I've now got the 3 large ones in the center. So now I need to measure this again. So now with the 4 that are on this side, that measures in at 4 centimeters. So altogether at the moment I have got 8 centimeters. So when I put the extra 4 on, it's going to make it 12 centimeters. Not really enough to actually go around your wrist. So I put the 4 large beads in the center. So when we measure it, we've got the 4 large beads from the distance of from the tip of that wire to the back of the wire, we've got exactly 9 centimeters. So measuring it from this one to there, we've got 4. So we've got exactly 13 centimeters. And 13 centimeters is the 5 inches that we actually need. So if I keep the 4th bead on, then the bracelet is going to be a little bit too big. However, the person that this bracelet is being made for, they've decided they'd much rather have it a wee bit big and have the 4 in the center. So we're going to have to try and make a very, very tiny little loop at the end so that it's not too big. So now we're going to add the small beads to the end. So going back down in size, so we've got another 6 mil, which I'm putting on, and then just continue adding these beads until you've used up your 4 beads. So now we come to the last bead. So now what we have to do is we're going to finish it off. So now, as if you were going to be taking your wires into that position so that it's crossing over the bead, but now what we're going to do is we're going to finish it off individually. So doing just one strand, I'm taking the inside one which is closest to the bead, and I'm going to just move the other ones out of the way slightly so that I can work with just that one wire. So in exactly the same way that you would be doing it, you're going to be going around, except this time instead of going around once, you're going to be going around twice, and then finishing it right up on the front of the bracelet so that if there's any sharp pieces, it's not going to scratch somebody's skin behind them. So now moving on to the second wire, which is the next one in line. So that one, and the same again, just wrapping it around twice. So that's twice, and then back in the same position so that it's finishing at the top. And then the third one, same again. Just make sure that you try and push them as tight as what you can get them to go, because they're going to be just that little bit bigger than the others. So we're in there, and then the final wire on this side as well. And as you can see, the pattern still looks the same, but now all the wires are secured. And now all you're going to do is you're going to just cut all those wires off as close as what you can get to here, so that we can tighten them by squashing them down. So I'm just taking my pliers and cutting them as close as I can get them. Just cut one wire at a time. Make sure you're only cutting that wire and you're not cutting your main shaft or main support wire. So one wire off, and the next one, and the next one. So now, as you can see, they've got a tiny little tail on them. So what you're going to do is now you're going to take your pliers and just squash them down by rotating the pliers to get them so that they lie flush in that little small section there that you've made, so that all your wires are now lying on top of your bracelet, so nothing is going to cut or hurt anybody. And then just do the same with these wires by going around as if you were going over the bead, and then wrap those ones individually as well. So So there the wire is all finished off now. So now what we're going to do is we're going to put our little circle on the end of this, turning your bracelet sideways and taking just a small section at the end there, just a few millimeters. We're going to take it and we're going to bend it so that we've got an angle like that. Then taking your round nosed pliers or your bail making pliers, placing it underneath there, and then we're going to do a full circle so that it goes all the way around. So we want it completely full, coming through. So now before you finish this off completely, what you want to do is check the little hook that you made before to make sure that it actually fits through the size loop that you've made. So that one's fitting very, very well. So what we're going to do is hold it in place with your pliers. This tiny, tiny little gap that we've left here, we're going to wrap this wire into that little gap. So just wrapping it as tight as what you can do, so that it looks like you've got a nice seamless end to it, and just keep going until you can't get any more wrap in there. And now we're back on the top of the bracelet, so holding it in that position, we're going to put a curl so that we can cover all these wires here that might be sticking up if we haven't turned them under properly or tightened them, so we don't want to hurt anybody. So now this particular piece of wire is just that little bit too long, so I'm going to trim it down. So I only want to have about, let's say, 2 centimeters, and I'm just going to cut the rest off. Then taking and holding it right at the tip, just start curling it over. So as you can see, no matter how close you go to the tip, you still get that small little square bit in the middle. So what we're going to do is cut that tiny bit off so we can keep rolling. So just take that wee piece off there, like that, and then keep rolling it to make a nice swell. And then flatten it down so that it's lying exactly on top. So it's like that. So it's very flat. Now we're going to finish off the other side in exactly the same way. So because this one was already where we started, there's not all the wires to close off. All we have to do is put the loop on this side. So once again, taking your pliers and holding your bracelet on the side, we're going to take a small bit on the inside and fold the wire backwards. Then putting your pliers on the inside like that, we're going to make a complete circle, so like that. Now you'll notice that I've made this one just a little bit smaller than the other side. So that's the size of that one, and that's the size of that one, because this is where the hook is going to be going in. So now we're on this side, but we've just done that, and now what we're going to do is we're going to put our hook on. So get the right size of your bracelet. So we've got, this is the one that's got the little ending on it, and we want the hook to pretty much land up like that when the hook is on and closed. So it's got to be going on that way. So you just have to undo the hook now and place it on top of that side so that it's through the loop. So you've got the hook like that. Now what we're going to do is we're going to hold that all in place using your pliers and holding it, and once again just covering and wrapping it around that small little gap that we left, making sure you keep the hook out the way, and then just wrap it around. So once you've wrapped it around, as you can see just over there, there's a tiny little gap there that I can get my wire to go in. So now I'm going to cut it really close, and then I'm just going to squash it in to that small little gap so it does not injure anybody. So just cutting that off, and I'm taking my pliers and just rolling that little piece of wire into place so that it does not hurt anybody. So now you'll notice on the one side the little loop is lying side on, whereas on the other side is lying flat on, so that when you close your bracelet the hook is lying flat. So now all we have to do is just shape it. So I'm just going to be using my hands to just gradually bend it round and round to get a shape that I want. So just moving it round. And for myself personally, I like to have an oval shape because it seems to sit just that much better on your wrist. So there we've got our bracelet all ready to wear. So that's what the bracelet looks like on. If you found this video helpful or you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up. Really appreciate it if you would subscribe. Thank you so much for watching.